Okay, it seems like it's slowed down. Uh, Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending this evening's presentation. My name is Tara Sundin. I work for the City of Bellingham in the Planning and Community Development Department. Thank you so much for joining our team this evening. We appreciate your interest in the Gardenview Tiny House Village. While tonight is focused on the city's partnership with LIHI, that stands for Low Income Housing Institute, and Road2Home, and how it aligns with one of the city's goals to address homelessness, I wanted to take just a few minutes to speak to you about the city's work to increase the number of affordable homes for low-income households in Bellingham. Our ultimate goal is housing, and housing that has services for people to become successful in the housing. Our ultimate goal is not shelter, but we do need safe places for people to stay while they wait for housing and while they prepare for housing. Building and acquiring housing does take some time. Fortunately, here in Bellingham, we've been at this for quite a number of years, and we've built up an impressive pipeline that you haven't seen on the street, so I wanted to share some of the exciting projects that are underway. You're probably familiar with Samish Way and the Samish Way Urban Village. This is a village that is part of York and the Home neighborhoods. Quite a number of years ago, the city acquired, through the beginning of a condemnation action, the Aloha Motel. And the Housing Authority is underway. They're almost done with construction of phase one, which will be a housing development of mixed demographic, but some focus with families. The entire development is in 3 phases. The second and third phases are funded or nearly funded by the City of Bellingham, and we'll have about 170 low-income housing units. And we always strive to set aside a certain number of those units for homeless upon entry. So those future residents at Gardenview are likely candidates for one of our future housing developments. It doesn't have to be this one, I'm just describing it. Very excited that the first phase that will be open in the next month or two of the Aloha has set aside 18 units, and those have been reserved for homeless upon entry, which is very encouraging to those of us that are focused on families with children. We have over 65 families right now living in motels, so that will help us substantially. Mercy Housing Northwest will soon be under construction with 80 units in our Berkeley neighborhood. And they're at the very beginning stages, but they've applied to us for funding for another 80 unit development in our city center, specifically within the waterfront district. The Opportunity Council is under construction right now in the Leonard Streets neighborhood with the Recovery House. And this is focused on helping those that have struggled with addiction to drugs and alcohol with recovery and housing and the stability that they need to get back on their feet. We're also pleased that the Opportunity Council is working with Whatcom County on a senior housing development that's in our downtown, part of officially the Home neighborhood as well. Lydia Place will be starting construction on Hart House. And while I'm actually in Leonard Street's neighborhood tonight, I feel like I'm in the Puget neighborhood tonight because we're having a meeting with, I know many of you that live in the Puget neighborhood, and Lydia Place will be starting construction there soon on their small but very important 11-unit development focused on families. And then finally, Catholic Housing Services exploring the potential for a housing development in Old Town, which is part of the Leonard Streets neighborhood. So altogether, we have over 500 units that are either under construction or will be under construction and working on funding that we can add to our community for those that are currently in shelters, but also for those community members that are rent burdened, aren't making enough money to afford rent in Bellingham or are on fixed incomes. So with that, I welcome you again. I thank the LIHI and Road2Home team for being here tonight. The bulk of this evening is focused on their presentation, but before we turn it over to them, I'm going to turn it over to Anya, who is one of our planners and is overseeing this permitting process. Thank you, Anya.
Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Anya Gedrath. I'm a planner 1 with the City of Bellingham, here to discuss the land use approval process and some information about the temporary shelter regulations. If you didn't know, this project requires obtaining a temporary shelter permit, specifically a temporary tiny house encampment permit, using a Type 2 process under the Bellingham Municipal Code. This is the same process that's been used for other tiny house encampments in the city. Per the code, the tiny house encampments are permitted in any zoning district and may be approved for up to 2 years. The zoning of the proposed site is public zoning with a cemetery use qualifier. After applicants submit a complete application, which they did, and a SEPA checklist, notice of application was mailed out on March 3rd to property owners within 500 feet of the proposed location. If you didn't receive a notice, you're either outside of the 500 feet or the property owner's address is located elsewhere. After the notice is mailed out, the 2-week public comment period begins. Anyone has the opportunity to comment on the proposal. Public comments must be written and submitted in writing. You can submit those to me. Every comment submitted during the public comment period is read and addressed in the permit decision. Per the code, a permit is then issued within, or permit decision is then issued within 30 days with a 14-day appeal period. In order to receive an approval, the applicants must demonstrate compliance with the temporary shelter regulations. You may have seen that the notice contains draft preliminary conditions that will likely be placed on the proposal by the temporary tiny house encampment permit issued by the city. As preliminary conditions, they may be further refined, modified, or added to based on the public comment received on the proposed permit. In addition to demonstrating compliance with the code requirements for temporary shelters, these carefully crafted conditions are developed for the health and safety of the tiny house village, as well as the surrounding neighborhoods and community at large. They also ensure the successful operation of the village. These conditions include, but are not limited to, noise, crime prevention, security measures, tiny house safety, hygiene and sanitation, site management, and more. I would recommend you review the proposed conditions included with the notice of application, which is posted at cob.org/notices. And I'll hand it over to Melissa Bird from Road2Home to talk more about the proposal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Bird. I'm president and one of the founders of Road2Home. I just wanted to let you know that I've lived in Bellingham with my family since 2011. This is my son. He goes to Colshan Middle School and we live in the Puget neighborhood. You can go now, you're released. We started Road2Home because we realized when we met working and volunteering at other agencies around town that while there were resources and services, it's really hard to connect with those. And so my friends Steve and Danielle and I got together and decided that we were going to start Road2Home to figure out what we could do to be part of the solution. We were very fortunate that other folks that volunteered in that other organization came with us. And we were able to, since last year, start a community volunteer training program with a grant from the Whatcom Community Foundation. We held 2 live trainings, one in December and one in January, with topics such as trauma-informed care, de-escalation, dealing with mental health emergencies, and other topics like that. We've also piloted a community ally program. And of course, we are starting this project at the Gardenview Village. I'm gonna pass it to Debbie, who is our lead community ally volunteer. Debbie, I think you're on mute.
Great. Okay, so community allies act as a support system for the folks facing homelessness. The relationship can be very different depending on what the needs of the person are. And they really are the driving force behind how it goes down. Being an ally is very easy. The most important thing you need to know how to do is listen and show that you care. And you don't necessarily need to have all the solutions for every problem. Sometimes just having a charged cell phone can make a task that seems super impossible all of a sudden very easy. My clients are so grateful for any tiny little thing that I can do for them. It's really the most rewarding thing I've ever done. Since joining Road2Home, I've had clients that live in tents in the woods. Some are at base camp. Some have been in the tiny home villages. The ones living in tents really are in survival mode. And the only thing that they can focus on is staying fed, warm, dry, and keeping their stuff together and not getting stolen. Basically, I do laundry, bring them food, dry clothes, and maybe help them put their tent back up after a windstorm. But the folks that are lucky enough to find emergency shelter or tiny home situation, it seems like all of a sudden they have a capability to tackle different types of issues. They're reconnecting with family, they're addressing long ignored mental and health issues. They're putting together rental histories, applying for Social Security benefits, or even something simple as learning how to knit. The very most fun thing is to help somebody find donated furnishings when they finally find their first apartment in a very long time.
And I'm going to toss it over to Bradford Gerber of the Low Income Housing Institute to talk about their tiny home program.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Debbie, just combined names there. My name is Bradford Gerber. I'm with the Low Income Housing Institute. I am a special projects manager, so I work primarily on tiny house village or innovative housing solution shelter development projects. I've been with the Low Income Housing Institute for about 5 years. I'm really honored to be on this panel today and to be working on this project and talking with you all. Who is the Low Income Housing Institute? We're a community-based organization, almost 30 years old, primarily based out of Seattle, Washington, but we do work in 6 different counties in the Puget Sound area. Primarily, our function is the developer, operator, and management group for affordable housing throughout the region. We have about 2,400 units of affordable housing in buildings, sometimes as large as 200 units, sometimes as small as a single family home with a couple of bedrooms for rent. This picture on the left is a building that we developed and operate in Renton, Washington. In the middle is a picture of an urban rest stop. We started doing that work in the early 2000s, providing laundry and shower services for folks that were unhoused in Seattle. And then on the right, which is why we're here today, is to talk about tiny house villages. This picture is a tiny house village that's right in the heart of South Lake Union in Seattle, right near the Center for Wooden Boats in that area. If you could go to the next slide, please. So what are tiny house villages? And exactly from an infrastructure standpoint, what might they look like? So LIHI, just for context, works in about 12 different locations in tiny house village organizing, and we've developed more than 15 different tiny house villages through our start of this work, which dates about 6 years ago. Some of the first sites that we were working on are actually more of tent cities. At that time, there was a little bit of hesitancy from our partners at the City of Seattle. The idea of tiny house villages was very new, so there was some reticence. And there was also reticence from the community. I don't think folks at that time really knew what it would be to have a sanctioned encampment. But since those early years, really this program has shifted dramatically, and we now have brought a lot of this to scale. We're really excited to be working on projects and invite more partners into this work. So we have villages in Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia. The picture on the right is all from a village called True Hope Village, which is in the heart of the Seattle central area. Each tiny house within our program is 8 feet by 12 feet, so about 100 square feet on the inside. They're all insulated. They all have heat. They all have electricity for charging devices and turning on a light, and they all have a locking door that the resident can take and leave with them. So they can keep their things stored in their house. They can go out for the day. They can come back and unlock their house, and everything is in the same space. All the villages also have hygiene and kitchen facilities, as well as community spaces. So a warm, temperate place where people can just hang out, be out of the elements, as well as offices for on-site staff, which is important. And we'll talk about that right after. So one of the main parts of tiny house villages is that they are serving kind of a portion of the population that's in traditional shelters. When folks are on mats, maybe 6 inches or sometimes even 6 feet from each other, but there's no walls separating them and there's no place to lock your stuff. A lot of people would decide not to stay in that shelter, even though there's not a lot of shelter available in most places, including in Bellingham. That is sometimes an untenable situation. So we try to serve as many people as we can by making the program as accessible to many. Next slide, please. So the tiny houses themselves, they're built by a variety of different groups: neighbors, volunteers, faith organizations, pre-apprenticeship programs, sometimes local contractors. With every single tiny house on the inside, this picture on the bottom left is a great example of a tiny house on the inside. It has a bed, 2 windows on the front and the back, storage space for hanging clothing and folding clothing, a heater on the inside that keeps it quite warm, a fan, a place to kind of keep your things. So that's the inside of the home. They are just like scaled down residential houses. So they have vinyl luxury flooring, they have nice kind of wall paneling on the inside, and they all have fire safety standards. So we're always using a carbon monoxide detector and a smoke detector on the inside. There are fire extinguishers throughout the village. So we adhere to fire safety, and we're working closely with the City of Bellingham to make sure that this site is really safe and really comfortable for folks. Next slide, please. Looking at the outcomes, I can comment that earlier in our program's history, case management was not one of the critical elements of our program. We were really just focusing on getting as many people inside as we could. And over time, as we've added resources, as will be present in this village at Bellingham, we found that folks not only could better stabilize and found more resources within the village, but they could move on to permanent housing at a far higher rate. So we found that direct correlation. When you have services, when you have community partners, when you have allies, when you have volunteers supporting residents, folks can move into housing much faster, and it really connects them in with the community. So that is one of the core tenets of our program. We've moved 704 people into permanent housing and 170 into transitional housing since we began this work in 2015. And that second bullet is that 50% exit rate, which for us has been just a huge success. It means that of all the folks that leave, half of them are moving on into long-term housing, which is a great goal and something we'd really hope to bring to this project. Of course, the rate of exiting into permanent housing is far greater for someone in one of these programs as opposed to someone who might move into a program and then decide that that's not good for them and they'd want to go to a different one or exit programs altogether. So we really try to serve folks, and rather than have people jumping from resource to resource, find what they need in a village and then hopefully secure housing. I'm looking at this site. This is a site plan of the village. So for anyone who has a question, of course, we can answer more questions about the site later on. But at face value, the site is right near Old Woburn Street, near the Lakeway Community Garden. So it's just to the west of that community garden. The homes are placed in kind of a U shape with that U facing south. So this is oriented with top of the page being north. Folks will enter from the top of the page. And so there's a separate parking area that will not be the same parking as for the community garden. And upon entering, you'll walk past one of the check-in homes, and then you'll enter the community space with the houses further to the south. So there will be up to 36 tiny houses, although initially there will be 30 houses that will be there, as you can see with the asterisks and the lighter numbers, serving up to 50 individuals total at max capacity. There will be hygiene facilities, so showers, flush toilets, hand washing sinks, as well as laundry services, that community kitchen and meeting space. All community spaces will be ADA accessible, and houses can be made ADA accessible as well to accommodate folks. And there will be 24/7 staffing at the village. So that check-in office will have a phone that people can call at any time of day if they're interested, neighbors, residents, anyone that has any questions and wants some support from them. There's also a perimeter fence that will surround the site, and there will be fire access maintained to get into the village as well. So we've been working closely on that. And looking at our development timeline, we are looking at starting development in early April. And that initial wave of development will consist mostly of utility work. So undergrounding utilities, preparing the site, and by the end of April, actually likely being ready to start moving structures into the village with a hope of, by the end of May, preparing the village for occupancy. That is our timeline. Things may shift slightly. And again, the experience for folks that are looking out at the village, it will come together quite quickly, and a village will come together, even though there will be quite a bit of contractor work to kind of prepare the site for those homes. Next slide, please. And I think I'm going to pass this on to my coworker, I believe, Teresa.
Hi, thank you, Brad. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Really love this work. I love being a part of LIHI. We have a strong desire to genuinely help people heal and move forward and grow and move into healthier places. So the Gardenview Village will have 24/7 staffing. And that means that it is round the clock. And in that way, we're ensuring that the village stays safe and peaceful, harmonious, as much as we can manage that. So the special projects manager manages the site. They're responsible for the overall safety and well-being and harmony within the village. And they're responsible for upholding the integrity of our program. In terms of the clients, they welcome the new villagers. They sort of manage disputes between villagers. They address villager concerns and kind of get to know them and get a sense of who they are so that they can guide their team in best serving each particular client. Of course, they also supervise the staff, and then they're ensuring that the property stays in good working order, the showers, the kitchen, that everything is working, that we're not running out of supplies, that unit turns are being done quickly so that we can hurry up and get somebody in out of the cold. On top of them, on top of the managers, we have case managers, right? And Melissa from Road2Home spoke a little bit about the services they provide and the support to the residents. And then our village organizers, they're the ones that are sitting at the desk when the manager and case manager are not on site. They're there round the clock, and they're really sort of supporting the villagers in a unique way, in that they actually have a little bit more time to kind of get to know them, make sure that they're helping in any way they can. They are doing chores in between handling villager concerns. They manage like laundry sign up, shower sign up, and even manage sort of the villager chore schedule. In this time of COVID, we are actually sanitizing everything every 2 hours. And so that is their responsibility. They're taking the temperature of everyone who comes in the village, ensuring social distancing, reminding our clients to wear masks, and doing all of those kinds of things. The residents are required to agree, to and abide by a code of conduct as a condition of their stay. And we enforce this code in several ways. But I will say it's kind of like parenting. What works for one might not work for the next. And so we strive to meet people where they are and really just figure out the best way to ensure that they are taking care of the things they need to be taken care of so that they can ready themselves for a move into permanent housing. And then finally, there is a means by which the villagers can file a grievance. If they are not getting a satisfactory answer from the manager on site, then they can come to me. And if I'm not giving a satisfactory answer, they can go to the director of the Tiny House Village program. Next slide. Okay, so Melissa from Road2Home. I don't know, Melissa, did you want to talk about this slide? Or did you want me to?
Melissa, go ahead.
Sure, I can do that. So case management will be provided by Road2Home. I am a nurse certified in case manager. We have an executive director who currently works in an inpatient psychiatric unit, so definitely has some great experience there. And then we will hire a case manager to work on site at the village as well. The case manager will support the residents in obtaining housing if possible, employment, healthcare, childcare, getting IDs, education, and more. Residents will be required to work with the case manager as outlined in the code of conduct, and the goal will always be for permanent housing. We plan to serve individuals, couples, families, and people with pets experiencing homelessness in Bellingham. Referrals can come from local service providers. There will be an emphasis on residents who are medically fragile and 55 years or older. And I'm going to hand it over to Tracy Williams to tell.
Hi, my name is Tracy, and I was a resident at True Hope. I came to True Hope last year, January, in the middle of January, having nowhere to stay, and I went around all over town trying to find a place that would take me in because I was staying with my sister. And so a lady told me to go to Catholic Community Service on 2030 Union. And so, Yesler. So I went up there, and then she told me to go talk to Pastor Jeffrey of New Hope Baptist Church, considering I grew up in the Central District and I grew up in that church. I went to talk to Pastor Jeffrey. He took me up to True Hope. We talked to Shelby, and Shelby had a space for me. And Pastor Jeffrey told me, Tracy, just remember this isn't for you. So the way I processed it was not to go in and get comfortable. So I advocate for myself. I met with my case manager twice a week. And while I was there, my case manager motivated me to get a job. And so I was like, okay, I'll love to have a job. And he's like, okay, because you're a social butterfly and you would be good at being a village organizer. So I started working for LIHI Housing April of last year. Next month will be 1 year I've been working for them. And I used to float around to different villages. I love what I do because I'm able to give back something that was freely given to me. And this program really does work. You know, it helps you get back on your feet. When I was in there, I got counseling session, doctor's appointments, and everything. And by the time I walked out of LIHI, I was able to love myself all over again and know that this program does have, that this program can help you get back on your feet and walk out feeling hopeful and loving about yourself. And I just can't explain how LIHI has helped me in so many ways, you know, as far as helping me back and forth to get on my feet, going to doctor's appointments and volunteering. I like to volunteer and everything. And I love being a village organizer. That's my favorite part. I love working with the residents because I have to remember I was once where they are. And so when I work with them, I remind myself that I'm no better than them, that I was in their same boat once upon a time, and they can make a difference to get their life back together and get back on their feet because LIHI does help you do that. And they have so many opportunities to help you with getting a bed, getting a U-Haul, taking you shopping, giving you a Goodwill voucher, and everything to help you get on your feet, you know, so you can be stable. So there's nothing you're not wanting from, or because LIHI will help you get back on your feet and start your life all over again. And I'm a witness. I live at Jensen Block on East Lake and Mercer. I have my own place now. I'm a permanent housing. I moved in August, and I love my place, and I couldn't ask for anything better. And I give all the thanks and praise to LIHI Housing for placing me into permanent housing and being able to have a permanent roof over my head.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sharing that story with us.
You're welcome.
It's hard to follow that. Hi, I'm Josh Castle. I'm the Community Engagement Director with the Low Income Housing Institute. Hello, everyone. So this village, and with all of our tiny house villages, we are very committed to being good neighbors. We take community engagement very seriously, and we want to be able to respond promptly, both Road2Home and LIHI, to any questions, concerns, ideas, or if people want to volunteer or donate, the community or neighbors. We are able to receive those requests and answer those questions promptly. We're forming a committee of neighbors and community leaders that are going to be made up of a variety of stakeholders, usually about 7 to 10, and this would include nearby businesses, service providers, faith community organizations, the immediate residential neighbors. It could be a local chamber of commerce. It could be another kind of neighborhood committee. And this is basically a committee of people that get together monthly, and we're doing that virtually now. And hopefully we have a light at the end of the tunnel and we can start getting together again. But so now it's going to be virtually, and we meet for about an hour to an hour and a half every month. And basically the neighbors get together and they review village operations with Road2Home and with LIHI. We go over the services residents receive, the outcomes for that month, how everyone's doing, and then provide advisory input. We go over, is there a concern in the neighborhood? Is there Is there something that the residents need? Is there some way that we can work together on something affecting, you know, both the residents and the neighbors? So we get together to talk about those things and to basically go over, you know, the different ways that the village is succeeding and getting people into housing, you know, finding employment, receiving the services that they need. Because this program really is a stepping stone. It's meant to help people get from experiencing homelessness into a village in a warm, heated, tiny house, getting some safety, some security, able to lock the door, secure your possessions. Get a glimpse into that process. These meetings are attended by Road2Home and LIHI staff. We're probably going to have the city on several of these as well as community representatives. They are also public meetings, so you can be a member, but even if you don't want to commit to being a member, you can join the meetings anytime and you know, listen in and participate just as actively as any member. So in order to apply, please email me. My email address is right on the screen, and I will send you an application, or I can send you just information on when the next meetings are. And we set up a calendar invite, so I'll add you to the regular meetings that go out. So we'll be forming that CAC over the coming weeks as we get closer to this village starting. So yeah, just email me if you have any questions or if you want to apply, or feel free to send it out to anyone else who you know might be interested in applying and being a part of this. So thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Helen Campbell to tell you how you can get more involved.
Thank you. I'm the volunteer coordinator for Road2Home. And one of the ways you can help, we gratefully accept any donations. We have information on our website on how you can donate. And we also are set up with Amazon's Smile program and the Fred Meyer Community Rewards program, so you could help that way as well. We also have a variety of ways you can volunteer besides being an ally. We will need help with fundraising, event planning, public relations. We'll want photographers to help track everything that's happening. Decorators to help the residents decorate their units, and gardeners, hopefully with our gardens that we'll have for the residents. And then also the building the tiny homes. Before I hand it over to Lisa regarding that, we are having a volunteer meeting this Saturday, the 13th at 10 a.m. The link is on our website and also on our Facebook page. And so now I'll turn over to Lisa Marks, who will tell us about the building portion.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everyone, for having me here tonight. Like Melissa, I am an active community-involved resident of Bellingham. I raised my kids here, and they are raising their kids here, and they've also attended the schools here in Bellingham. My community has really given so much to me and my family over the years, and I enjoy giving back to the community when I can. I volunteer because I truly appreciate and care about our neighbors and our community. I'm a journey level scaffold builder in the Carpenters Union. And for the last 5 years, I have worked for apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship doing outreach, retention, and curriculum development. That work connected me to many great partners, community partners like LIHI, Road2Home, pre-apprenticeship programs, workforce councils, schools, and their career technical education programs, tribal training programs, and Department of Corrections training programs, and many others. I have worked with many of these organizations and LIHI to build these houses across the state. To not only help build these homes for folks in need, but to also help folks and our youth learn skills that can lead to a pathway to apprenticeship and living wage careers in the construction industry. We are hoping this build can be another one of those opportunities. We have reached out to Northwest Youth Services and other community partners to see where we can build on some of these partnerships while we are building these homes for folks that so desperately need safe shelter. If you are an experienced builder and would like to help build and teach, please contact Road2Home at the email up there. And if you're a school or an apprenticeship program that would like to build one of these tiny houses for your program, please contact LIHI and they can get you set up with materials and details. I know a lot of schools have a hard time, coming up with materials and things on a fixed budget. And this is a great opportunity for schools to be able to have a project like this to, also help the community and be able to teach the kids. So I just want to say that I have seen these builds change lives for the better in so many different ways. And how cool would it be to be able to give folks shelter and be able to see our kids maybe get on some of these construction sites that you heard about at the beginning of this event. Thank you. And I don't know who I'm passing it on to.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
I think we can open it up to Q&A now.
Okay.
All right. I did skip over a slide at the beginning of some ground rules, but there's a little summary here. Just as a reminder that this is a neighborhood meeting and one for the proposer to describe the project and for you to get your questions answered. This is not a public hearing. So this is not the type of meeting where it's to provide public comment, but is an opportunity to get your questions answered. We did receive a number of questions in advance. And while people were talking, I was trying to keep track of what questions we felt got answered during the presentation and which ones still need to be answered. So we'll start with those that were submitted ahead of time. We are here tonight until 7:30, and I want to kind of honor that time and keep us as close to on track as possible. So our commitment to you is if we don't get to your question tonight, there are some names listed here. Questions can be directed to Josh at LIHI.org, Josh Castle at LIHI.org. And LIHI's promise, and they'll include us in their responses, is that they're going to get back to all of you. And then all of the public comments. So any comment you want to make after getting your questions answered, hearing questions answered, hearing these presentations, need to go to Anya, and that will become part of the official record. Okay. So before I start getting through Q&A, start thinking about whether or not you do have a question that hasn't been answered tonight. And there at the bottom of your screen, if it looks like mine, there's a yellow hand, a raised hand, and Shannon is keeping track of you guys while I'm kind of dealing with Q&A. And she, when we're done with the written questions, she's going to start at the top, and she will bring you into our panelist room so that we can see you, and you'll be given the opportunity to ask your question. And then you'll be brought back to the rest of the attendees, and our team will address that question or agree to get back to you if we don't have the answer for you tonight. And then just remember, this is an opportunity for us to be respectful of one another. And we just want to honor that and honor each other and our neighbors and honor those that might have children listening. So we're not going to tolerate any harsh or inappropriate language. And I don't think that will be an issue tonight, but I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to start with answering a couple of questions myself. There were some questions about the city's relationship with LIHI and Road2Home and our request for qualifications process. So late, kind of in the fall of last year, as we were building this year's budget, we were noticing that base camp was getting was becoming more full than we had anticipated, and we felt like we needed another solution. And so we issued a request for qualifications, and LIHI and Road2Home partnered. So I think you'll have learned that Road2Home is a local nonprofit They have some experience, but they partnered with LIHI, who has, I think, hands down the most experience in the state of Washington running tiny home villages. So they teamed up and provided a response to us, and they were, we felt like they were definitely very well qualified, and we selected them. This project is going to be funded by the City of Bellingham and donations raised by Road2Home. There was a question about funds. So to build the site out, we're using some different sources of funds. First of all, Whatcom County has purchased 20 of the 36 tiny homes, and the city will use 2 local sources for building out the village. Primarily the real estate excise tax fund, and that is a fund that we use for capital construction locally. And then a little bit of general fund for things that are not eligible for the real estate excise tax. The other source of funds that we're going to be using for operations, not for build out, is our Community Development Block Grant Program funds from HUD. So we're an entitlement community, and we receive funds for services such as these. And those are the 3 sources that we're going to use for this. We're going to have a license. Somebody asked about a license. Yes, instead of a lease agreement, LIHI will be signing a license agreement with the city in order to be using our property. So that's happening. We'll also have a services agreement because we are paying LIHI to provide, and Road2Home to provide, staffing for this village and case management for this village. And there will be reporting, and there will be outcomes, and they will be held, accountable to just like the rest of the agencies that the city funds in Bellingham. And then let's see, there was one more. I wanted to also, somebody asked about the Parks Department and whether or not this village was going to interfere with their use of clean green. This is the one spot. So we work with Parks. In fact, the Parks Department is overseeing the build out of the tiny home village. And so when we were looking for sites, this was one of a couple that we kind of had landed on. And we didn't want to interfere, nor did the Parks Department want to interfere with the community garden. So we already have a spot here that's not needed by the Parks Department. And then on the other side of the tiny home village was where both Public Works and Parks still needed access. So this village is kind of sitting in the one location of this property that has been not used, underutilized, and not needed for quite some time. And so I think that covers some of those kind of basic questions that were asked. I'm going to turn to, we're going to zero in on some locational issues. So there was a question asked about the Puget neighborhood. I'll kind of generalize this, but we have Swift Haven that is over at Jerry Field, and that is a village that's being operated by HomesNOW, and that is a temporary location. I'm going to let Rick Sepler get into this a little bit more. And then there is this other encampment that was called 210 that moved 210 Camp 210 and moved to Jerry, which is an illegal encampment, and I'll also let Rick Sepler cover that one. But the question is, why so many of these tiny home villages in the Puget neighborhood? So Rick, would you like to provide some context of what's going to happen probably by the time May or the summer rolls around?
Yes, my name is Rick Sepler. I'm the director of the Planning and Community Development Department. And I want to address those specific concerns. Swift Haven, as many people know, operated by HomesNOW, was an emergent need to get housing on the ground quick. And in looking at the portfolio of lands owned by the city or operated by the city that were available that could be quickly converted for housing in an emergency circumstance, it was the one that was most readily converted. And its duration there is very limited. We are currently working on establishing a long-term location where we can relocate that village. And that hope is that will happen in April or May of this year. We're working with Whatcom County on a site right now. Hopefully that will perfect. Camp 210 is unfortunately an illegal encampment that was never permitted by the city. After the City Hall encampment was closed by the city, folks chose to relocate there, and they were noticed in early February that it was an illegal use. The city has entered into a process to close that illegal encampment, so that will come to an end in the near term. Lydia Place, like many of our service providers, is a long-term facility that's been supported by the community and by the city in this neighborhood. I should note that community-supported housing and social services are throughout Bellingham in every neighborhood. And in this case, we have a long-term partner that's managed to, has established very strong and good relationships with the local community. And we've had very few issues associated with their use there, and they do tremendous good for the community.
Thank you, Rick. Let's see here. I think you touched on a couple additional questions. Thank you very much. There were a number of questions that probably should either go to Anya or Rick about permitting that quite didn't get covered in the presentation. I do want to clarify that the application is for a period of 2 years. Which I'm not sure if that could have been clarified, but I just wanted to put that out there. And the question, Rick, is can an extension be granted, and who is the decision maker? And then there's some questions that I don't have the background on, but I think Rick and Anya do, about how is this different from the application that was submitted pre-COVID?
I'll take it, and I'll ask Anya if I miss anything to jump right in. The first is our code allows tiny home encampments to last up to 2 years. That's the maximum currently allowed. However, I need to make full disclosure. We believe that if a tiny home village is successful and is able to place a significant number of its residents in permanent housing, we should, on a case-by-case basis, extend that. But we have not yet proposed to our planning commission or city council that modification. That will be forthcoming. We think it should be linked to meeting all of the conditions, addressing any neighborhood concerns, and most importantly, getting people into permanent housing. That's going to be the metric we'll use. It's very likely the next couple of months we'll be advancing an amendment that'll be subject to public hearings, both before the Planning Commission and the City Council, and we'll be providing adequate notice and welcome your opinions on that. In terms of the decision maker, I am the decision maker. This is an administrative decision with notice. The director of the department has the authority based on specific criteria to approve it. This is not prejudged, and it is not a rubber stamp. It's based on the merits. In order for this to be approved, we have to make a positive and affirmative finding that every single criterion in our code is met successfully, and we have more than a reasonable chance of success. And we use this period to fine-tune our conditions, to listen to concerns from the community, to use the experience of operating 5 prior temporary encampments, both in buildings and in tiny homes, and apply those based on lessons learned in other communities to ensure that it's compatible with the surrounding area.
Thank you. And Anya, briefly, could you describe the process that you're in right now and its connection to SEPA? Just real briefly again. If you...
Yeah. I didn't go into it so much in my overview because I was limited in time, but the SEPA checklist is the State Environmental Policy Act, and that's a checklist that's provided along with the application. to address any or identify any potential environmental impacts on the proposal. And simultaneously with the notice of application, we also issued an optional notice of determination of non-significance, as we expect to issue a DNS, it's called, for this proposal, saying that we don't see any environmental impacts, but we'll be closely reviewing that checklist before we issue a decision and make sure that that any potential impacts of the proposal are mitigated for either by the code or by the conditions that are issued. So the 2-week comment period for the SEPA notice is the same as for the notice of application. So folks have until the 17th to provide public comment, and that's when the public comment period will close. And I think Rick covered all of Tara's questions, except I was just going to add that there's nothing different about this process than other tiny house encampments that we've reviewed in the past, except I will say that, as Rick mentioned, the Swift Haven was a different process because it was approved through an emergency order.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of questions about how the villagers are going to be selected. And part of this I'm going to start to answer, and then I would to enhance that information based on some of the conversations you've been having with the Opportunities Homeless Services Center. So one of the things when the City of Bellingham is involved in funding agencies, we require that they work through the communities. This is a county-wide homeless service center. It's housed at the Opportunity Council, and they are, so to speak, a one-stop shop. And that's where we're looking for LIHI to find people that are good fits for this village, right? But also, how do we, they're also going to be working on getting people from this village into housing, okay? There is a question about, do Bellingham residents get precedent? Do Bellingham former, residents get precedence over Whatcom County? And that is not the case. We don't do that here in this county. That always is an ongoing conversation, but that is not how we've chosen to do it thus far. Anyone can go in and get signed up to be on our homeless services roster, just as somebody that was a former resident of Bellingham that finds their way to Olympia can go in and get signed up to be on their roster as well. So to date, we don't have any precedents for Whatcom County or Bellingham, even though this one is funded by Bellingham. Does Road2Home or LIHI want to add anything to how villagers might be selected?
I'm going to hand this to Melissa.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can speak to that. We will be taking referrals from the Whatcom Homeless Service Center using the coordinated entry system. We are in discussions with other agencies trying to figure out if we could still take maybe a small percentage of other referrals or referrals from other agencies, such as Lighthouse Mission. Could Road2Home refer some of their clients they've been working with thus far to LIHI for this program? And all those details are still being worked out. This will be a sober facility. I see that is on the list. There'll be no alcohol or drug use on site. So that's one of the questions. So that would be a requirement. People would also have to be good to live in a communal living situation. You're going to have, lots of roommates, at least 29 of them probably. So let's see. How will this new tiny village differ from the one at Jerry Fields and the one in Fairhaven? Those models have a resident run model. They don't have any paid staff and no case management. So these ones will have paid staff members that don't live at the village, and also case management, some paid case management, and to help the volunteer allies with our residents. Let me see if there's any other kind of services type questions. I think I got most of them. There's a lot of safety questions.
Yeah, I've got a couple little ones that I'll hit, and then we'll turn it over to LIHI and Road2Home and Chief Simon on some safety questions that the neighborhood's got. Question: there will not be, somebody asked if WTA will increase its services as a result of this village, and that's highly unlikely that they would change the pace at which the bus service goes for the 20 or 30 or so homes. They change their service based on ridership. So if we see a lot more ridership along Lakeway, that could make a change there. There will be some ADA compliant. We were just talking about that earlier today, is trying to figure out, even though the code doesn't require it, we clearly know that the guests will require it in certain cases. So we're trying to figure out where those are and how many of those there should be. And I think that covers a lot of questions before we get into safety. So I'm going to hit a few questions, and then I'm going to let LIHI and Road2Home and Chief, and Rick has a lot of experience as well, working with the other tiny home villages in the community. So here's some of those questions for you guys. What steps are being put into place to protect? We have spoken to police officers off the record. It's on the record now, that recommend we should consider security measures if the village is approved. Is the city going to pay that extra cost? How is the city going to protect Magnolia Hills neighborhood from increased crime? And how is that safe for our neighborhood when walking trails are the main source of exercise? So basic general safety, and maybe all of you could also talk to the experience that you've seen in your tiny home villages and other communities, as well as here locally. I'll let whoever wants to start.
Thank you, Tara. This is Josh Castle with LIHI, and when it comes to safety issues, so I can answer this. I can answer this question kind of partially because there's a lot of aspects to this. So every resident, as a condition of living in this tiny house village, has to sign a code of conduct and abide by that. The code of conduct includes no disruption of neighbors, obviously no violence, no theft. There's quiet hours. There's also a requirement to work with the case manager on a plan for housing and and services. So everyone's required to do that. If they're on making positive progress, they may not have to meet as much, but they have to have they have to make sure they're on a housing plan, and that they're working with LIHI to basically eliminate all those barriers to housing. And then we also have the community advisory committee that checks in every month on any issues that come up in the neighborhood. If there's something that concern people, people want to bring to that, they find out something going on in the neighborhood, or something that they think might be somehow related to the village. This is actually the chance to come and share those concerns or share those questions. These are attended by LIHI and Road2Home. And like I said, these are public meetings. Anybody can join us to be a part of that. The other thing is that we have sort of the difference between this and maybe other sites. We have 24/7 staff that are always there. So there's a special projects manager, and then there's organizers that do the security and all the operational support outside of that. So there's always somebody there. There's always a phone number to call at 24/7. You can call it 2 a.m. if something's coming up. Somebody will always be there to answer no matter what. And you can also come and even ring the gate, and hopefully we can do more in-person stuff in the future, where you can do more of that kind of thing. You can just show up in person. But even now you can still do that. And somebody will answer the gate no matter when you're there. So basically, there's staff there that are going to kind of keep track of things, basically help out the residents in making sure everyone's following the rules. And if somebody is not abiding by the code of conduct, if they're like repeated violation of it for some reason, or if they're in serious violation of it, then we're going to work, on a better shelter or better situation that meets their needs. And being in a community like that might not work for them. So they have to be somebody who's able to live in a community and participate in that. And I can pass it off to other folks with Road2Home or LIHI who may have other information to share.
Hi, this is Tracy. Thank you, Josh. I just would like to add that in the code of conduct, one of the criteria for being in the LIHI program, Tiny House Village program, is that you also have to sign up for a chore. So we are constantly sort of monitoring. In the first place, the village will have a fence. And in the second place, we're constantly sort of monitoring what's happening just outside the fence, and definitely fully monitoring everything that happens in. We have cameras to help us, investigate when something weird does happen, but it's a great preventative, because people do realize that in most places in the village, they are on camera. And so that's another way. Through these community meetings that Josh is speaking of, the Community Action Council, we are able to discuss these kinds of issues that arise. If people see something and think it's related to the tiny house village, we immediately jump into action and do an investigation and see if that's in fact true. And even if it's not true, and we can be of assistance. For example, we were getting reports that these boxes were showing up outside around one of our properties, which was a shelter. And there was an assumption made that it was coming from our tiny house villages. When we investigated, we found that wasn't true. And yet, because we knew that this was a problem that had arisen, we started going out there and cleaning up and making sure that all around our area stayed neat and tidy. So we do believe that, cleanliness really does act as a deterrent to crime. It's proven, there's studies, and we really want, we want to maintain a certain vibe to the village anyway. We want it to be pretty. We want it to have flowers. We want it to feel safe and homey and comfortable. And in providing that and creating that environment, people are less likely to, damage the space, because they're grateful to be there more often than not. So
I'll go next. Hi, I'm Chief Flo Simon with the Bellingham Police Department. I kind of have a hard time with the question about increased crime in the neighborhoods, only because I teach implicit bias. And that question to me says that people experiencing homelessness are criminals, equal criminals. And that's just not the case. I've been around since the tiny villages started in Bellingham, and I can tell you that crime has not increased in any of those neighborhoods. In fact, when we visit those tiny villages, the folks there are welcoming. The people that live around there are happy that they're there. And so I don't have a concern about increased crime in the neighborhoods, especially because they have rules, they have a code of conduct, they have people that are there 24/7. So I would say to you that that is not a concern of the police department. The other question about police officers off the record saying to get security systems, they're police officers. I would tell anybody to get a security system, whether there was a tiny village there or not. It's just being safe in your home. But I don't believe you're going to need extra security measures because we have folks moving into the clean green space. So I'm excited to see this happen, and I'll answer any other questions that folks have on the issue of safety.
Okay,
thank you, Chief Simon. Can I add one point? There was actually a study done on this for all the current villages, done by the Guardian, May of 2018. If you Google it, you can look it up. And the study found, they did a whole study of all the villages and crime rates in the area around the village. And they discovered that on average, there was no increase in crime in any of the neighborhoods where a tiny house village was cited, there was no increase in crime around the village. So they actually have data that backs this up. And it was a really great study that they did. They did a whole bunch of research on it, and I encourage folks to go and look at that.
Thank you, Josh. Maybe you could forward it to us and we could put it on our website. That would be great. Anything else before we get into the attendee questions? Okay. All right. So I think what we'll do then, let's see, time check. We've got a little over 20 minutes left. And I see that there's 6 people that have their hands raised. So I think we should be able to get to all those questions. What Shannon is going to do is bring the first one into the panelists, and she will unmute you. Hopefully this goes right. And you'll ask your question, and then you'll join the rest of the attendees and we will answer it. So Shannon.
Okay, the first up we have is Alex. And I'm going to allow to talk. Alex, you're ready to speak.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Alex. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for having this meeting. This is valuable information. I have two questions. Has the city considered using the address 600 West Holly adjacent to Parberries and C Street for any additional tiny homes? And my second and last question is, I know the Parks Department is going to be moving to the Public Works Operations site on Pacific Street. Is there kind of a medium, a long-term plan to add future tiny homes or low-income housing in that area? I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So I can tell you that the plans for Old Town right now include what we're focused on there, which is Old Town is also the home, or is where 600 West Holly is, for those that don't know. What the plan is there is the lighthouse mission is, I think you may or may not know, but base camp that's located on Cornwall Avenue is a temporary location. We have that site for about 3.5 more years. And so Old Town is slated to be the future home and permanent home of base camp, along with some additional shelter needs above and beyond base camp. So that's really our focus right now in Old Town, is building that long-term permanent solution for the mission services. I think the question was about the Pacific Street site. And I do know at one point in time, we had talked about some tiny home village over there, and construction, Rick, has posed the issue for the tiny home village location. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. It was one on our short list. We thought we could relocate at that location to do that. Unfortunately, they needed laydown area for the ongoing and funded project of their new facility at that location. We lost the site. And I think the question was about 600 West Holly specifically.
Yeah, we did. I mean, 600 West Holly is a couple blocks away from the mission. We briefly looked at it for a potential tiny home village. The 600 West Holly site is part of a development agreement with the Parberry family, and they have since exercised their option to purchase that site, which could be new information for some of the attendees, is relatively new. And then as far as the Clean Green site goes, Public Works, Planning, Parks, Mayor's Office, we're all aware that there should be a long-term plan for that site. So I believe the Public Works and Parks departments are doing some planning. So our long-term vision for Clean Green is not a tiny home village. And I'm hoping that our community's long-term term plan is not for tiny home villages. I hope that we as a community can do better than that long-term. Shannon, next
Next, we have Barb. Barb, you should be allowed to talk now. You might be on mute.
Is it me?
Yep.
Yes,
you're up.
we can hear you, Barb. Hi.
Hi. I was interested in knowing about financial situations for my house that I own in Bellingham, maybe about 2 blocks away from that site. And if I was going to sell the house, if that's going to be a big issue, that the value of my home would go down, or if you think people aren't going to want to buy the house knowing that this tiny house community is there, what has happened in the past?
I don't have specific knowledge on the other tiny homes. I've not heard of actual loss in revenue. Rick, have you ever heard of that assertion?
Right now in Bellingham, there's no disincentive to sell any property. There are very few properties listed. It's an outcome of COVID. Nationwide, there hasn't been a significant adverse effect on this type of development, this a tiny home, which has a higher barrier as exactly what we're talking about proposed for the site on adjacent properties. That's my understanding.
I can also add, this is Brad, in more anecdotal experience, we've looked for studies that have been done on exactly this topic. We haven't found them similar to the one that Josh mentioned around crime. So there isn't any kind of verified quantitative data, but qualitatively and anecdotally, we have opened tiny house villages in residentially zoned areas of Seattle and other places that have been actually far closer to residential single family neighbors than this current lot is. And almost, across the board, we have good relationships with every single one of our single family home neighbors at these villages. And I've talked to those neighbors who have decided to sell their homes. And I have talked with folks that haven't had any issue doing so, where there had been a village recently added. I think it's worth noting that tiny house villages tend to be fairly quiet places. When there's a fence around the site, it's not like there's a tremendous amount of foot traffic that's going in and out. It doesn't turn into kind of like it's not like a place where people are constantly hanging and there's like a revolving door of folks going in and out. People are often hanging out in their homes, hanging out in the kitchen. We try to bring as many services to the site that we can so that people aren't going out into the community and looking for resources like that. So by providing more of a wraparound services model, I think that's one of the contributing factors as to why we haven't heard of any issue that folks have had facing diminished property values nearby.
Thank you, Bradford.
Okay, we have next up, we have Beth. Beth, you might be on mute, but unmute yourself and you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Beth.
Oh, you can. Hi.
Hi.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out which question, the one I want to ask. Am I live or am I just amongst you?
Everyone can hear you, the panelists and the attendees.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm curious about how this site, sounds like it has not yet been approved in terms of the SEPA requirements and the other on-site requirements for building on and utilities. When will we know more about that?
So Anya, do you want to describe the permitting process and timeline ahead of us?
Yeah, I can take that. So as I said, the public comment period will close on the 17th. That's 2 weeks from the date that the notice of complete application and notice of application went out. And the code requires us to issue a decision within 30 days of receiving a complete application. There is also provision that we can, that the director can negotiate with the applicants an extended time frame for issuing that decision. That is a particularly speedy and rapid decision timeline for us, since we want to really thoroughly go through all of the comments that were received and make sure we respond to those in depth. So that would be the reason for the delay in issuing a decision. So any folks who have provided public comment and Also, if you you don't have a comment, but you want to be notified of the decision, any party of record or folks who have expressed interest in receiving a notice of decision will be notified of the decision of the permit as soon as that's issued, or within 3 days of the permit decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next we have, and I apologize if I mispronounced this, Banush. You're up next.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, hi.
Okay, so in this presentation, I did not hear anything about the cost of running this village. So that is a concern to me as a resident of Bellingham. And then the second question is, with HomesNOW having been a successful local nonprofit organization that has been running two locations in Bellingham, one at no cost and one at a low cost, why are we going to bring a company who's in the business of running these villages, and they're in the business of making money, not to end homelessness, into Bellingham? So why wasn't this offered to HomesNOW? If you could answer the question.
Okay, we will answer your questions. There were a couple in there. First of all, this village is going to cost a little over $500,000 for the construction of it. And that includes all of the supplies necessary, the kitchen, the hygiene trailer, electricity, all of that. And it's going to cost a little over $500,000 to operate it. So for those shelters do cost anywhere from about $500,000 and upwards to $1 million, depending on the size of them, to operate if they are operated under a model where you're paying staff to operate them. So for example, last winter, we hired the Opportunity Council to operate a winter shelter for the city. And we also hired Northwest Youth Services to operate a winter shelter for the city. So those two combined were about $55,000 a month on average. And those were nighttime only shelters. So just to give you a sense of that, I am not as familiar as HomesNOW. HomesNOW did also submit a statement of qualifications, and the panel that reviewed the qualifications selected LIHI and Road2Home partnership because of the model that they have. So it is a bit different, but we are paying for a different model. We are paying for a staffed model, a model that has case management on staff. Does anybody else, I'm sure LIHI would like to respond, and then Rick, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add about HomesNOW.
I just wanted to say one thing, Melissa.
Yeah.
So I understand that's a lot of money, my goodness. And I'm also a taxpayer, but I'm also a human being who's running a nonprofit, and I can't run this safely in your neighborhood and continue to work and raise my family. That's not, I need someone to do this. And so in order for us to do this, we need to pay qualified individuals to do this work so that we can take on clientele that really need our services and do that in a very safe manner for you, for them, for us, for everybody.
If I could follow on, it's Rick Sepler. There's not one size fits all on this, and we needed a variety of approaches. This approach was felt by the review panel and by the city at the end run as offering a good opportunity with a proven record of placement. HomesNOW is succeeding. They've placed people in homes. It's a different kind of program, and it might suit a different group of people. We need as many different approaches as we can develop safely.
Can I add something quickly? This is Debbie. I'm the lead community ally for Road2Home. I think to have the residents run the village takes time away from their ability to move forward in their own lives. That's my experience. And that's why we started Road2Home. Getting your life back together and finding permanent housing is a full-time job. And if you have to take shifts running the camp and doing the welcome desk and being available 24/7 to run the village, it doesn't give you much extra time to work on your own life.
Hi, this is Tracy Holman from LIHI. A couple of things. One, LIHI is also a nonprofit, so we are not profiting from this by any stretch. We are currently managing about 12 villages in Seattle and Tacoma and Olympia. And we are getting ready to open about 6 more in probably the next 6 months. And we just, we have a deep commitment to sheltering as many people as possible and serving that gap need between being on the streets and being in permanent housing. So, so this is a nonprofit. Secondly, I would just add on and say the same thing you just heard, that we also tried self-managed villages and finally evolved into the model that is for us the most successful, partly because of a system of checks and balances, and everything is being measured, everything's being monitored. And that is simply for us to figure out the very best way to move as many people from homelessness to being housed. And so, you know, for us, we did find that people get complacent and get too comfortable in trying to live in the village, manage it themselves. Plus, there are inherent situations that can arise that create systems of the possibility of an abuse of power, inequity within the village, a favoritism shown toward certain individuals, other individuals being exited unfairly. And I am not saying that's the case with the other villages in Bellingham. I'm just speaking from LIHI's own experience. And what we've settled on today with this 24/7 managed village idea is that for us, this is the best way to do it. And I will also add that every single person in LIHI's staff in a village has a commitment to moving people forward, so much so that we actually started a campaign called Speak to Their Future, Not Their Past. And every single person plays a role specifically in that. And what that looks like is the manager learns, like, from their income base, what kind of housing is available to them. Their job is to then steer them away from the idea of a house with 4 bedrooms and get them thinking excitedly about the possibilities that really exist for them. The role of the organizer, I think they have the coolest job. Theirs is to just kind of be shooting the breeze, getting to know the villagers and asking those forward questions. So what's next for you? How do you see yourself beyond the walls of this village? And get the villager articulating and dreaming and creating hope from within. They decide what their future is going to look like, and we're there to support that dream. And then the case manager obviously plays an important role. Get them paper ready, get that ID, get that social security card, get them so set that that they can't possibly be turned down for housing. For us at LIHI, that means, you know, paying people's rent from a eviction from 10 years ago. It means many different things. And so I would just offer that in our commitment to do this as well as possible, as quickly as possible, with the most integrity possible, this is the model that we found works best.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on because it looks like we could talk on that topic for a while. We're going to move on because I'd like to get at least one more question in. And for those of you that are further in the queue, we are going to put the email addresses up and points of contact for you before we tune out here. So let's turn it over to Thomas for his question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Thomas.
Hi. Yes, my question goes, and I hope I didn't miss it during Josh's presentation. I got temporarily distracted, but my question goes to the comment about 24/7 staffing. And if someone from LIHI Road2Home could speak to what literally like a day in the life of the operating tiny home village. What happens if you want to break the day into day, evening, nighttime shift when we say 24/7? Who's actually going to be on site and working, volunteering, staffing?
Right, so I can answer that one. And so we have our special projects manager. They are the manager on site. They are responsible for supervising all employees. They're there 9 to 5. An organizer comes on 5 till 1 in the morning. And then the third organizer comes on 1 in the morning till 9 a.m. So Monday through Friday, we're staffed like that going into Saturday morning. Saturday and Sunday, we have 2 employees. They work a 12-hour shift, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. Same thing on Sunday going into Monday. That gets us to Monday morning, and the SPM is on again. And that is how we have our 5 staff members who are there all around the clock. And so it's 4 full-time positions, 2 part-time positions.
Thank you. Plus the case manager, which is where we get the 7. And I'm going to take one more question from Jonathan Kennedy.
I actually have a group of questions. First one, we talked about funding earlier. I heard $500,000 for construction, $500,000 for operation. Is the decommissioning, demolition, and restoration funded as well at this point under the temporary conditions that we have set forth? When it comes to I got a couple more I want to get in here too.
Okay, quickly.
When it comes to operations, are you screening for sexual offenders? Just because I know kids walk from Colson Middle over the Magnolia area, right by there. And what exactly do you mean on the flyer by medically fragile?
I will quickly talk about the funding, and then I'll turn it over to LIHI to talk about the management of the other issues. We are not including decommissioning in that. I will tell you that the site right now is not something that's in prime condition to be returned to some prime state. And a lot of the things that are being purchased can move. So the hygiene trailer is on wheels. The kitchen facility is tented and can be moved, as well as, of course, the tiny homes. But some of the sunk costs, just to be straightforward, the electrical work, some of the utility work, the pathways are the primary things that would be sunk costs, which is why we're looking at having this village stay for a 2-year period. And then, Teresa, is that best handled by you, or Melissa, those other questions?
I think I can take those. So we would plan on not having anybody, a resident that had any violent criminal history or any sexual criminal history. And we'll be working with Chief Simon for that. And then there was another question. Oh, medically fragile. So really what we're looking for, there's not like a set definition of that, but chronically ill individual, somebody who could really benefit medically speaking with a roof over their head. So someone on oxygen, someone requiring insulin, so they need a refrigerator to keep that cold. Somebody with some mobility issues, maybe a little bit of early dementia, because we have the 24/7 staff there that would at least be able to say, oh, we should call the police, somebody is leaving, who doesn't know where they are right now. We will not have medical staff, so it will not be like a licensed nursing facility. There will not be nurses there. There will not be physicians there. It won't be like that. People will have to live independently. So they have to be able to take care of themselves. But if they had caregivers or those types of things that came in to help them live their life independently, that would totally be acceptable as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Melissa. We are at 7:30, a little over 7:30. I wanted to mention that we've got, we've got a few people that do have more questions. And so we want to ask you to please follow up with us. Again, questions can go to Josh, and his email is there, and he will respond. He will get us to respond and copy us, of course, in his response to you. And then Anya is there as well. So as a reminder, this is your opportunity to provide written comment that becomes part of the record, and it becomes part of the planning department's, I guess, in how they're going to determine those final conditions and that permitting process. So it is definitely important that you send those comments to Anya. Anya, can you just unmute yourself and tell them one last time what the deadline is for the comment period?
Yes. The deadline is the 17th of March for your public comments.
Okay. And for those of you that want to include Road2Home, Road2Home will also be included. You could send that to info@road2, as in the number 2, home.org. And I want to thank you all for your attendance tonight. Appreciate the large group of people that spent their evening with us, and we will be in touch with you soon. Again, thank you, and good night, and thank you, panelists, for your work this evening as well.